Well, like some of you, my mom is no longer with us, and I miss her, especially on days like today. I'm sure you feel the same way about yours if you've lost your mother, but I did marry a woman who's a very good mom, and she did well with my 5 kids. And today I'm giving her a very nice present. I'm taking the remote and wrapping a bow around it and saying, "Here you go, sweetheart. Happy Mother's Day." That's really hard for me to do, on Sunday afternoon. Of course, I will tell her, hey, if there, just in case you're wondering, there is an Astros game on and there is a golf tournament, and if you want to watch it, you don't have to, but if you want to. But I mean, sometimes though, I am married to a hot mess, and you moms, I'm sure, can relate to that phrase, right? And it's not just moms; it's guys too. We can get in a hot mess, and I'll give you an example. Back when my oldest, Heather, was, I think, middle school, maybe 6th grade or so, we had 5 kids, and everybody has to kind of chip in and do their part, especially when it comes to getting ready for school. And on this particular day, when she was in middle school, Mom, Diana, had to work, and she had to be in the office pretty early. She was a dental assistant. So she was at the office, and my job, of course, was getting the kids to school and making sure their lunches were made and all that stuff, because I didn't have to go in as early as she did. And so that was kind of our daily routine, and we were going through our daily routine, and as was our routine, the older kids helped get the younger kids ready for school. And so Heather was trying to get my youngest, Hannah, ready for the day while I was downstairs doing my thing. And so, everything was going fine until all of a sudden I heard a crash followed by a scream. That's never good in any order. And so I quickly recognized the scream was Heather. I quickly ran up the stairs as fast as I could. And what had happened was she was helping get Hannah ready, and she was sitting on a trundle bed. The trundle that they slept on, you can raise it up to sleep at the same height as the other ones. And she had been sitting on that trundle getting her sister dressed, and she needed to scoot up. And when she scooted up, that thing collapsed. And it collapsed on her fingers, got right in the mechanism. And it was stuck there. And I had to, she's screaming. I'm trying to get the bed up, trying to get her finger out. I look at it, and I immediately know this is not good. There's blood all over the place. And I know I've got to get her to the emergency room fast. And so this is another thing I appreciate about my wife being in the medical field. Blood does not bother her. However, it does bother me. And but in those instances, the adrenaline kind of kicks in, and you do what you have to do, right, parents? You just do what you have to do. And so I quickly washed her finger off, wrapped it in a towel, and looked at it again. I went, oh my gosh, she may not be able to keep this thing. And so I don't even remember. It happened so fast. I don't remember who came and took care of the kids, or if I just left them there. I don't know. But somehow I got her to the emergency room. And, man, we were praying, and I called Diana, and I said, I've got this, but, I'll bring her by after we're done. And so they were able to sew it back on, and thankfully, her finger was saved. We praise God for that, because it could have really been bad. But I have to tell you, I was a hot mess that day. And I appreciated my wife for being the mother that she was. And then after we were done, was going to take Heather by her office so that she could see her mom and that mom could see her. And so I bring her in the office, and, instead of, oh, I'm glad you're okay, blah, 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 thank you, honey, for taking care of her, it was, she has her gown still on, and she's got blood all over it. What's the deal here? And I went, hey, I'm just trying to survive. That's all. But anyway, we got through that crisis. But parents, you know the feeling that when your kid is sick, you're going to do anything you can to make sure they get well, right? And if they're in an accident, you're going to do everything that you can to take care of them. And if they just have a need, a big need, you're going to do everything you can. All parents know that feeling, right? Well, we're going to talk about a woman in the New Testament who had that same feeling, had that same challenge, and her story is in the book of Matthew, chapter 15. If you want to turn there, we're going to take a look at her story, and we're going to learn a really important lesson from her this morning. And that lesson is this, that instead of just surviving, a thriving mom has faith and refuses to give up. We're going to meet a woman, a mom, who is a hot mess, and she's so desperate and persistent, and she refused to take no for an answer. And I wonder how many times have we given up when maybe one more prayer, just one more prayer would have gotten us what we needed. Jesus told a story one time about a man who had some unexpected company, and he didn't have any bread to give them. And Jesus tells this story and says this man went to his neighbor's house to borrow some bread. The only problem was he went in the middle of the night. You know, how would you feel if somebody knocked on your door at 2 or 3 a.m. and said, hey, you got any bread? This is what happened. And he said, the guy in the house says, look, we're asleep. Can't you see that we're asleep? We're down for the night. I'm not getting up just to get you some bread. But Jesus said the man kept on asking, and he kept on asking, and finally the guy got up and gave him the bread. Not because he just wanted to help somebody in need. It was because the guy wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't stop asking. So this man was rewarded for what he asked for. So mom or dad or anyone for that matter, you don't have to just survive. You can thrive. And what I have to say today may be aimed at moms, but it doesn't matter who you are, parent, mom, dad, single adult, student. All of this will apply to every single one of us, okay? I'm just going to talk to moms especially today because it's your day. Turn to Matthew 15 again. Let's read the story of this mom who was a hot mess. We're going to begin in verse 21. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. And he answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. And he replied, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, it is, Lord, she said. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then Jesus said to her, Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Let's just stop a moment and ask God to reveal to us what he wants us to see in this passage, all right? Let's pray. Father, we open our hearts to you. We thank you for the moms that are here today, for the moms that aren't here, for the moms who've already gone to meet you. We're thankful for them all. But Father, I just pray today that you would have a word for them. And not only for them, but for all of us. As we seek not to just survive, but to thrive. Show us what we need to do. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, let me just give you a little bit of background on this passage. Jesus had been very busy. He had been in a village called Gennesaret. After feeding 5,000, he had gotten so tired he wanted to rest. He's trying to rest. But he didn't get very much because he had to rescue the disciples from a boat in a storm. And the people had come for healing. The Pharisees had come to challenge him. So he knows that the end is coming very soon, and he wanted some time alone with his disciples. So Jesus did something that he hadn't done before, nor would he do again during his ministry. He left Jewish territory, going north through Galilee to Tyre and Sidon. So maybe being in a non-Jewish territory, that might give him some downtime with his disciples. Now, of course, Jesus never did anything or went anywhere without a purpose. And he's not in town 5 minutes before this woman, this mom, approaches him on behalf of her child. Now, when you first read this, the scene we see here seems very wrong. Did you get that feeling while we were reading it? I mean, the reactions and words of Jesus are not what I would have expected them to be. And we get a picture of Jesus ignoring someone in need, someone he's indifferent, who says basically, get lost. You're not good enough to receive my help. And if we quickly read that passage and went on to the next, that's the impression we might be left with. But this passage is so different from the rest of the gospel. You know, was Jesus having a bad day? Did we see a crack in his perfect love and compassion? Well, like I said, Jesus never did anything or went anywhere without a purpose. So let's find out what's going on here. Let's go back. Let's go through this one more time, back to verse 21, and see what Jesus is doing here. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and a Canaanite woman came from that vicinity, came to him crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. Okay, there's the need of the mother. Her child is demon-possessed. That's obvious. Now, what that meant was that there was something mentally affecting this child toward violent behavior, sometimes harming herself, possibly harming others. And in many cases in the New Testament, there was some serious demonic possession going on. But there were other cases that might have been mental illness, and for lack of a better explanation, they called it demon possession. And we don't know what the case was here, but whatever the case was, this woman's daughter is suffering. Now, if you're sick, you may want to find yourself a doctor. If you're having a legal problem, you're going to want to find a lawyer. If you're having family problems, you may need to go to a counselor. If you're having trouble in school, you may need to go to a tutor. If you're having trouble with leaking pipes, you may need a plumber. But if your problem is demon possession, you may want to find an emancipator, a liberator, a mind fixer, if you will, an exorcist. You need to find Jesus. And that's what this woman thought. I mean, Jesus' reputation had no doubt been spread far and wide, even in this non-Jewish territory. So no doubt she tried everything she could think of, and she'd heard of Jesus and that he could do anything. So here's what I want to point out that we can learn from this woman already. I want you to write this down. A thriving mom will cross any barrier to get to God. A thriving mom or person will cross any barrier to get to God. This desperate mother had at least 3 barriers that stood in the way of her getting help. The first barrier was that she was a woman. Women in her day were merely seen as property. They were to bear children, care for the family, and for a woman to even approach a rabbi or a teacher, an important teacher, was presumptuous on her part. Any other rabbi would have ignored her, and it appears that Jesus did too. First barrier, woman. Second barrier, Gentile. This woman was a Gentile, which is a non-Jew. Another strike against her if she wanted this Jewish teacher to heal her child. And Gentiles were rejected by Jews because of the pagan practices of their culture. And then the third barrier was that she was a Canaanite. A woman, a Gentile, and a Canaanite. And there was a hatred by the Jews for the Canaanites that went all the way back to the day of Joshua, when the Israelites had to fight them to possess the land. And the Canaanite religion was basically that of a fertility cult. It may have been possible this woman was a temple prostitute, and this child was a result of that action. We don't know. But this woman crossed all 3 of these barriers to get to Jesus. And she had faith that he was the only one who could help her. Now, let me ask you, is there something that's keeping you from expressing faith, from being persistent in prayer? Something that's standing between you and a need or a problem that you have. Maybe you think you're not good enough. Maybe you think it's too late. Maybe your barrier is just a lack of faith and you don't believe God's going to do anything about it. Just remember, a thriving mom will cross any barrier to get to God. And those who don't will find their needs unmet and their problems unsolved and their lives unchanged. Well, let's move on to verse 23. Jesus did not answer a word. Silence. Very unlike Jesus. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." And he answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. Now look at what happens here. At first, she gets the silent treatment from Jesus. That's so unlike him. Where's the compassion? So I'm sure she felt rejected by his silence. And then you have the disciples who are evidently fed up with the woman crying for help. And they ask Jesus to send her away. So she not only feels rejected by Jesus' silence, she now feels rejected by the disciples. And if that's not enough, Jesus finally speaks and basically says, "Look, I'm not here for you. You're a woman, you're a Gentile, you're a Canaanite, a pagan Canaanite. I'm here for the Jewish people, my people." And after that, I'm sure anyone would have just melted back into the crowd. Rejected by silence, rejected by the disciples, rejected by the reminder of who she wasn't. But that didn't stop her. What does she do? She comes and she kneels down before him and says, "Lord, help me." I don't want you to miss this. In the Greek, it literally means she knelt down and worshiped him. Right there in front of God and everybody. Many translations use this word worship in this verse. What does that mean? It means a thriving mom realizes who God is and what he can do. By kneeling down before Jesus and crying out that 3-word prayer, "Lord, help me," this woman is acknowledging who Jesus is. And the reason I know that is the word Lord in the Greek is the word kurios, which means supreme authority or controller. She acknowledges that Jesus is God. And when she says, "Help me," it means she understands that she's not in control. And she's more than willing to submit to who he is and to his control. She realizes who God is and that he, if he wants to, can help her daughter. I think this is a real obstacle for us when it comes to being, thriving people of faith. For some reason, we don't realize who God is and what he can do. And when we don't, it makes us dependent on ourselves to solve our own problems, to try to meet our own needs. And we miss out on being rewarded for expressing our faith that God can and will help me. If we realized who God is and what he can do, I believe we would express our faith more and we would experience God doing so much more in our lives than we could ever imagine. A thriving mom realizes who God is and what he can do. Now look at Jesus' response to this in verse 26. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." Ouch. Jesus, you didn't just call this woman a dog? Well, like I said earlier, when you first read this, it looks like Jesus is having a bad day. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think Jesus is doing 2 things. 1, he's testing this woman's faith. And 2, he's teaching his disciples a lesson about grace. And Jesus knows exactly what he's doing. So he reminds her again, she's a woman, a Gentile, and a Canaanite. And this mother knows exactly what Jesus is saying, and I think she knew where Jesus was going with this, because if you look at verse 27, she says, "Yes, it is, Lord. It's not right to give children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Yes, it is, Lord," she said. "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." I think she gets it. She may even have a little attitude going. "All right, Lord, go ahead. By all means, feed the kids. But I bet you have a crumb for even me." And she won't give up. She knows she's not worthy of any help Jesus can offer. But for some reason, she recognizes, either by reputation or intuition, that Jesus is the giver of grace. And that's the third thing I would tell you, that a thriving mom is aware of God's grace. A thriving mom is aware of God's grace. She's basically saying, "Jesus, you're right in saying I don't deserve your help. I don't. You're right in pointing out who and what I am. But I also know that I'm not leaving here without a crumble of your grace. I know you can heal my daughter, not because of who I am, but because of who you are. Just a crumb of your grace," she says, "will change our lives forever. And if all I get are the crumbs, I'm fine with that." And I can't help but think that Jesus smiled after she said that. And I bet he looked over at his disciples as if to say, "Guys, are you hearing this? Are you hearing this? This is what faith is about. This woman is laying it all on the line to get what she wants. Are you taking notes, guys?" And finally, Jesus turns to face this woman, and the mask comes off. And for a moment, he conceals his great goodness of heart. He had a purpose, and now that purpose is the fulfilled. The test is over, and it's time for the grades to be given out. Verse 28, "Then Jesus says to her, 'Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted.' And her daughter was healed from that very day." Woman, you have great faith. In the entire New Testament, Jesus only said that about two people. Do you remember the Roman centurion? The story of the Roman centurion who asked Jesus to heal a servant who was in his home. And he told Jesus, "You don't even have to come to my house. You just speak it, and I know it will be done." And Jesus said to that guy, "I have not seen a greater faith in Israel." Well, now here he is outside of Israel. And he says to the pleading hot mess of a mother, "Woman, you have great faith." And that word great comes from the Greek word mega. Mega. We have mega malls and mega structures and mega everything. Jesus said, "Consider your request granted. You have mega faith. You didn't give up. You realized and acknowledged who I was, and you trusted in my grace to give you what you didn't deserve." You don't need to just survive. A thriving mom has faith and refuses to give up. When she started her prayer, there was no response. Then she got a negative response. After that, not only a negative, but also a provocative response. Still, she did not give up, and she was rewarded for her daughter's healing. It's a great story. It should be great encouragement to you moms out there. It should be a great story of encouragement to all of us who are going through things, and we think that God's not hearing us, God's not going to do anything about it, and God's just waiting to see if we're going to be people of faith. So, what does this mean for you? Well, I think it means one of three things as we close. Number one, some of you haven't even come to the table. Here's a woman who didn't even have a place at the table, and she receives God's grace because of her persistent heart. What barriers are keeping you from coming to the table? The table where the crumbs are satisfying. What's keeping you? Is it that you don't feel worthy? It didn't stop this woman. She was aware of God's grace. Or is it that you just don't realize who God is and what he can do? And if that's the case, then you are your own barrier. You think you can handle the problem. You think you can do it on your own. But you will not be rewarded until you recognize how small you are and how big God is. So some of you need to start crossing barriers and getting to God as quickly as you can. You need to come to the table. Second, some of you are facing a faith test. Something is going on in your life. It's difficult. Things don't look good. You don't know if you'll ever find relief. But it's more than that. It's not just a series of problems. You're praying, you're kneeling, you're begging, and still there's no response. God seems to be silent, invisible, indifferent. You don't give up. You persist until an answer comes. How does your faith compare to this woman? Have you over and over again asked God for help or for healing, and it seems like he doesn't hear you? Does it feel like he's maybe not treating you as a father would or should treat his children? Could it be that Jesus is testing you and he's waiting on your persistence to reward you? So some of you may be facing a faith test. And then finally, some of you just need to ask for help one more time. You're one prayer away from healing. You're one prayer away from getting what you asked for. You just need to refuse to give up, and your faith will be rewarded. And so, on this Mother's Day, I ask you, moms, do you want to thrive or just survive? And that question is applicable to all of us. Moms, dads, people who thrive, have faith, and never give up. I want you to repeat this phrase after me. God is not moved by my needs. Let's try it one more time. God is not moved by my needs. He is moved by my faith. Now let's say it all together. God is not moved by my needs. He is moved by my faith. Can you remember that? That's what happened with this woman. God was moved by her faith, and he'll do the same for you. I want us to pray together as we close. Every head bowed, every eye closed. I don't know where you are, but I want to give you just a few moments to spend with God alone, to answer the questions that we've asked today. What barriers are keeping you from coming to the table? You're going through something right now. There doesn't seem to be any answers. There doesn't seem to be any response. Have you even come to the table to ask? Have you even asked? Whatever barrier is keeping you from the table, remove it. That's what this woman did. Are you going through a faith test right now? Maybe God's saying, look, I'm waiting on you to have some faith. Maybe it's just a test. So you got to come to the table. You got to pass the test. You just to be aware of his grace, that he can do whatever he wants to do and realize who he is and what he can do. Maybe you just need to ask one more time. Christ, Father, I want to give you an opportunity to just do some business with God right now. And maybe you're here or you're watching or listening and you've never established a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Maybe you haven't realized that just shortly after this confrontation with this woman, not too long afterwards, he would go to the cross. And he would die to pay for the sins of this woman as well as yours and mine. And when we receive that gift of forgiveness, we begin to follow him, and he reveals to us why we're here, why he created us, what we're supposed to do with our lives, and then finally we just get to go into eternity with him. It's a great deal, but you have to accept him for who he is and acknowledge who he is and what he can do. If that's you today, I hope that you'll take a moment to just make that commitment, to step across the line of faith, as we call it here at Creeks Inn, to give your life to Christ, to come to his table. Because just a crumb of his grace is satisfying. Receive that forgiveness. Receive the opportunity to live with a purpose, and receive the promise of eternity. You can do that in your own way, in your own words, in your own seat, wherever you are, by simply praying a prayer to ask Jesus to come inside you and begin to follow him. Father, I lift up every single person in this room and all those who are listening to my voice. Father, I pray for them to become people, moms, dads, parents, single adults, students of faith, to refuse to give up when they struggle, to cross any barrier that they have to get to you, to realize who you are, what you can do, and to be aware of your grace. I pray for anyone here who needs to cross that line of faith today to follow you. Give them the courage to make that first step, and you'll meet them the rest of the way. Father, thank you for the moms today. Again, we honor them. And by honoring them, we honor you. And we ask this in Jesus' name.